It's a very sad news. Michelle Duggar car accident, hospitalized. Jim Bob very crying. Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. For Duggar family latest news update, please subscribe the channel and press the bell icon. The late afternoon sun was sinking behind the rolling Arkansas hills, painting the sky with streaks of orange and violet. The Duggar family home, usually filled with laughter, the sound of children running, and the hum of daily chores, felt strangely heavy that day. A storm of sorrow was about to descend, one that no one in the Duggar family could have ever imagined. Michelle Duggar, the heart of the family, had gone out earlier that day to pick up some groceries and check in on a close family friend. She had waved goodbye to Jim Bob, who stood in the driveway, smiling as she drove off in their silver SUV. Neither of them knew that within hours, their lives would be turned upside down. The accident, happened on a quiet two-lane road lined with trees and farmland. Michelle was humming softly to a hymn on the radio, enjoying the solitude. Suddenly, a deer darted across the road. Startled, she swerved sharply to avoid hitting it. The tires screeched against the asphalt, the steering wheel fought against her grip, and in an instant, the SUV veered off the road. The vehicle crashed through a wooden fence and slammed into a tree with a deafening thud. The airbags deployed, the windshield shattered, and the world went dark for Michelle. A passerby, a farmer named Mr. Collins, was the first to arrive. He rushed to the mangled SUV, his hands trembling as he pulled out his phone to call 911. Michelle was unconscious, her head resting against the deflated airbag, her breathing shallow but steady. Within minutes, sirens echoed across the countryside. Paramedics worked quickly, carefully pulling Michelle from the wreckage. Her body was limp, her face pale. They placed her on a stretcher, strapped her in, and loaded her into the ambulance. Jim Bob gets the call. Back at home, Jim Bob was in his study, flipping through some old family photographs when his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something in his gut told him to answer. Mr. Duggar? This is Washington County Emergency Services. Your wife, Michelle Duggar, has been in a serious car accident. She's being transported to Mercy Hospital right now. The words hit Jim Bob like a hammer. His breath caught in his chest, his hand shaking so violently that the phone nearly slipped from his grip. What? No, not Michelle, he whispered, tears already welling in his eyes. He rushed into the living room where several of his children were gathered. His face told the story before his words did. Jana, the eldest daughter at home, stood frozen. Dad, what happened? It's your mom. There's been an accident. She's in the hospital. Jim Bob choked out, his voice breaking. In an instant. The house erupted with sobs, gasps, and frantic prayers. The hospital. The family van screeched into the hospital parking lot. Jim Bob and a handful of children rushed inside, their hearts pounding. Nurses directed them to the waiting area, where the sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air. Jim Bob collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. For years, he had been the rock of the family, the steady presence, but now he was crumbling. Tears poured down his cheeks as he whispered, Lord, please don't take Michelle. Please don't take her from me, from our children. Doctors worked tirelessly in the trauma room. Michelle had suffered a concussion, several broken ribs, and internal bleeding. She was placed on oxygen, hooked up to machines that beeped rhythmically, each sound a reminder of the fragile line between life and death. Hours felt like days as the Duggar family waited. Each minute was agony, each passing doctor a source of hope and fear. The children's reactions. Jana tried to remain calm for her siblings, but her hands shook as she led them in prayer circles. Jessa clung to Ben's hand, tears streaming down her face. Joy comforted her younger sisters, while Jill, a trained nurse, quietly asked hospital staff for updates, desperate for any scrap of medical information. The younger children didn't fully understand what was happening, but they knew something was very wrong. Some cried softly, while others simply clung to their older siblings, too scared to ask questions. Josh, the eldest son, arrived later, his face grim. For all the family's past struggles, in that moment, they were united in grief and fear. Jim Bob's breaking point. When the doctor finally entered the waiting room, Jim Bob jumped his feet. Mr. Duggar the doctor began gently. Your wife is in critical but stable condition. She suffered significant trauma, but she's fighting. She's unconscious right now, but we've managed to stop the internal bleeding. The next 24 hours will be crucial. Relief and fear collided inside Jim Bob. He broke down completely, sobbing openly in front of his children. Thank you, Jesus, thank you for keeping her alive. Please, let her stay with us. He buried his face in his hands, crying so hard that his body shook. For decades, Michelle had been his partner in everything: their faith, their family, their life. The thought of losing her was unbearable. Flashbacks of love. As he sat by her bedside later that night, holding her hand, Jim Bob's mind wandered through decades of memories. He remembered the first time he saw her, her warm smile lighting up the church room. He remembered their wedding day, Michelle radiant in her white gown. He remembered the birth of each child, Michelle's strength and grace even in the hardest of times. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "You're my everything, Michelle. Please come back to me." The family's vigil. For the next several days, the Duggars rotated in and out of the hospital, keeping vigil by Michelle's side. They prayed, sang hymns softly, and shared stories about their mother. Jinger, calling in from Los Angeles, cried over the phone as she spoke to Michelle, even though her mother couldn't respond. "Mom, we love you. Please fight for us." Every family member leaned on their faith, clinging to the hope that Michelle would recover. A ray of hope. On the fourth day, as Jim Bob sat exhausted beside Michelle, something miraculous happened. Her fingers twitched in his hand. He looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Michelle? Honey, can you hear me?" he whispered, leaning closer. Her eyelids fluttered, slowly opening. Her eyes were weak and unfocused, but they were open. Jim Bob gasped, tears pouring down his cheeks as he pressed her hand to his lips. "Thank you, Lord, thank you." Nurses rushed in, checking her vitals, but Jim Bob never let go of her hand. Michelle's voice was faint, barely more than a whisper. "Jim Bob, I'm here, sweetheart. You're safe. You're going to be okay." The road to recovery. Michelle's recovery was slow and painful, but she was surrounded by love every step of the way. Her ribs healed, her strength gradually returned, and though she needed physical therapy, she remained optimistic. The family rallied around her. The older kids took on more responsibilities at home, caring for the younger ones. Friends from church brought meals and offered support. Through it all, Jim Bob remained by her side, his devotion unwavering. Many nights, he cried quietly when no one was watching, overwhelmed with gratitude that his wife was still alive. The lesson learned. Congratulations, Jill Duggar gives birth to twins amid serious health scar. The Duggar family had always been no stranger to the spotlight. From the years of their reality TV show, their strict family values, and the inevitable controversies that followed them, they had become a household name. But behind the flashing cameras and constant chatter of media speculation, they were still a family, real people with real emotions, victories, and tragedies. This story begins with Jill Duggar Dillard, the once wide-eyed, soft-spoken Duggar daughter who had grown into a strong, independent woman. Married to Derek Dillard and raising their children outside of the strictest shadows of Duggar traditions, Jill had always walked a delicate line between staying true to her convictions and seeking her own identity. Now, in the late summer of 2025, Jill's life was about to take yet another dramatic turn, a pregnancy full of hope and worry. Jill had announced her pregnancy quietly, without the fanfare her family was known for. She and Derek had chosen to share the news only after she had passed the first trimester. At their 12-week ultrasound, however, they had received a shock. She was carrying twins. Jill had gasped and grabbed Derek's hand tightly as the doctor smiled and pointed at the screen. "There are 2 heartbeats," the doctor had said, his voice calm but tinged with caution. "Twins." Derek, his eyes wide, leaned closer to the monitor, his face lighting up with joy and fear at the same time. 2, oh wow, Jill, can you believe it? Tears had spilled down Jill's cheeks. She had always dreamed of a big family, but after years of complicated pregnancies, difficult births, and strained health, twins felt both like a miracle and a risk, because that was the other side of the coin. Jill's medical history was not simple. She had already endured hemorrhages during past deliveries, long hospital stays, and the painful reality of being categorized as a high-risk pregnancy. Now, with twins, the risks multiplied. Family reactions. When Jill shared the news with her siblings and parents, the responses varied. Michelle, her mother, had gasped and hugged her tightly. "Oh, Jill, 2 more blessings from the Lord. But, sweetheart, you must take care of yourself. I'll be praying every day for your safety." Jim Bob, trying to balance joy with fatherly concern, had placed a hand on Derek's shoulder. "This is wonderful news, son. But you must watch over her carefully. Twins are a great responsibility." Her sisters, Jessa, Jinger, Jana, had each reacted in their own way. Jessa squealed and immediately began talking about matching outfits. Jinger, now living in California, called in tears and promised to fly out as soon as she could. Jana, ever the quiet caretaker, simply smiled and told Jill she would be there whenever needed, but underneath the excitement, worry simmered. Everyone knew Jill's health was fragile, and the thought of her enduring the strain of carrying and delivering twins was frightening. Trouble on the horizon. By the time Jill reached her 7th month, complications had already set in. Swelling in her legs, severe headaches, and dangerously high blood pressure began to plague her daily. Doctors warned her about preeclampsia, a condition that could put both her life and the baby's lives at risk. One afternoon, while folding laundry, Jill felt a sharp pain shoot across her abdomen. She clutched the edge of the couch, calling out for Derek, her voice trembling. Derek rushed in from the other room, panic in his eyes. "What's wrong?" "Jill, I don't know, it hurts," she gasped. Without hesitation, he grabbed the hospital bag they had prepared weeks earlier and helped her into the car. As they sped down the road to the hospital, Jill prayed silently, tears streaking her face. She knew things were happening too soon. The babies weren't due yet. The emergency. At the hospital, the atmosphere was tense. Doctors rushed Jill into a room, attaching monitors to track the twins' heartbeats. One doctor frowned as he read the results. "The babies are in distress," he said gravely. "We can't wait. We need to perform an emergency C-section now." Derek's knees nearly buckled at the words. He gripped Jill's hand tightly, pressing his forehead against hers. "I'm right here. I love you. You're going to be okay. Our babies are going to be okay." The surgical team wheeled Jill into the operating room, the bright lights glaring above her as fear clawed at her chest. She whispered a prayer, repeating it like a mantra. "Lord, please keep us safe." Birth amid chaos. The operating room was a blur of voices, machines, and urgency. Jill could hear the beeping of monitors, the clipped commands of the doctors, and her own rapid breathing. Then, suddenly, the first cry pierced the air. A tiny, fragile wail. "Baby A is out," a nurse announced. Tears streamed down Jill's face. She couldn't see, but she could hear the miracle. Moments later, another cry followed. Baby B had arrived. "They're small, but they're breathing," the doctor said, relief softening his voice. Jill tried to lift her head, desperate to glimpse her babies, but her body felt weak, her vision blurring. She had lost a lot of blood during the surgery. Nurses worked frantically to stabilize her. Derek, standing close, caught his first glimpse of their sons, 2 tiny, red-faced infants bundled quickly and taken to the NICU for support. His heart swelled with love, but dread gnawed at him as he turned back to Jill. Her face was pale, her eyelids heavy. "Stay with me, Jill," he whispered desperately, tears dripping onto her hand. "Please don't leave me. The boys need you. I need you." The long night. For hours after the surgery, Jill's condition remained critical. Doctors worked tirelessly to control the bleeding and stabilize her blood pressure. Derek sat by her bedside, clutching her hand, praying silently. Meanwhile, the Duggar family began to gather at the hospital. Michelle and Jim Bob arrived first, their faces etched with worry. Jessa came rushing in, followed later by Jana, and even Joanna. The waiting room filled with siblings, in-laws, and even some close family friends. Everyone prayed, cried, and clung to one another. The usually cheerful Duggar clan was subdued, their voices hushed. At one point, Michelle leaned against Jim Bob's shoulder, whispering through tears, "She's my baby, Lord. Please don't take my baby." Dawn of hope. BY morning. The doctors emerged with cautious smiles. Jill was stable. She was weak, still in recovery. Derek wept openly, hugging the doctor in relief. When he was finally allowed into her room, he found Jill sleeping peacefully, her face no longer ghostly pale but tinged with color again. When she stirred awake, her first words were faint but full of love. "The babies, are they okay?" Derek smiled through tears. "They're fighters just like you. Small but strong. They're in the NICU, but they're holding on." Jill closed her eyes, whispering a prayer of gratitude. Meeting the twins, it was 2 days before Jill was strong enough to be wheeled into the NICU to see her babies. The room buzzed with quiet activity, tiny cries, beeping monitors.